Okie dokie. Hopefully that has solved the issue. I think I've got the sound currently working again. I'm not really sure what the hell is going on there. I don't know if somebody's coming in and messing with the settings or what the hell's going on, but hopefully now we have proper audio and we are rocking and rolling on this edition of the AfterBuzz. And this week, what I'm going to be talking about mostly kind of baseball stories because I got baseball in the brain. I'm about ready to head out to the Chihuahuas game. If you can't tell by me wearing my KLAQ station T-shirt. Kaplowitz actually hooked me up with a press pass for the season so I can go to games and do a bunch of blogs about the Chihuahuas and stuff like that, which should be a ton of fun. And what I kind of figured I would talk about today is a lot of different baseball stories. If any of you have a good baseball story that you want to throw into the old YouTube chat, you're more than welcome to do so. We'll share some of them here. But like for me, baseball was probably the biggest part of my childhood in regards to sports. I played baseball. I watched it constantly. My summers, for the vast majority, were spent watching WGN and TBS Braves and Cubs games because a lot of those things were on during the day, so you got to watch a lot of day games. And then we had a big playroom where I would like act out baseball games, in my head, and then also, I'd have my batting stance and I would swing and jumping around and causing entirely too much damage to the house that drove my parents absolutely nuts. But that was that's kind of the whole childhood aspect. I played it growing up. We had kind of the same group of kids from, I want to say it was third grade, pretty much through high school. It was the same group of kids. It was the same team, third grade through eighth grade, where we played every summer together. There would occasionally be a different kid coming in, and we were pretty good too. We won the county tournament a couple of times, I think. We placed in state, and we ended up doing pretty good. And so there wasn't a major league team in Portland, but we did have a AAA team when I was growing up. It was the Portland Beavers, and they played at what's now I think it's called PGE Park, which is where the Portland Timbers play. It's changed names multiple times, but they're not allowed to have baseball played there anymore because the MLS, when they came in and the Timbers wanted to make the jump to the MLS, the league told them, if you guys are going to be in this league, your stadium has to be soccer only. You're not allowed to play baseball in your stadium. So they converted it to a soccer field, no more baseball. And at that time, there was another version of the Portland Beavers, which I can't remember. I think it was the early version of the Chihuahuas, actually, because it was the Beavers that went from Portland to another city, and then I think they ended up landing here in El Paso. And then which was before, when I was growing up, this is why I'm a Minnesota Twins fan, is because the Portland Beavers were the AAA ball club for the Portland Beavers. And since we didn't have the major league team in Portland, but we did have the Seattle Mariners around, it made it so that I was able to go up to Seattle and go check out some Twins games. And that's something that we would do occasionally. I still remember my first trip to Seattle to see the Twins play, and I was in sixth grade, so this had to have been like 1990 or 1991 or something like that. It was when the Twins were really good. They had Kirby Puckett, Kent Hrbek, Shane Mack, Jack Morris, like all those guys were on those Minnesota Twins teams. And so I remember it was me and a friend of mine and our families. We went up. We actually got the day off of school, and we took a day trip up to go see the Mariners play the Twins. And I remember walking into the Kingdome, and the Kingdome sucked. The Kingdome was a horrible stadium. This thing was not cool. But when you're a kid, everything's gigantic. It was awesome. They were playing the Mariners. They had Ken Griffey Jr., Randy Johnson. It was pre-Alex Rodriguez and some of those other guys that – remember the Mariners team that won well over 100 games that one year? That was Randy Johnson. Who was it? It was Randy Johnson, Ken Griffey Jr., Alex Rodriguez, Jay Buhner, Tino Martinez, Edgar Martinez. That Mariners team was a lot of fun to watch, but I hate the Mariners. Anyway, and I remember sitting in the stands, and we were out in the left field bleachers. And as we were sitting there, and it was a day game, so there wasn't a whole lot of fans in the crowd. And I remember this couple sitting in front of us, and Kirby Puckett's up to bat, and Kirby Puckett was my guy. Like, I loved Kirby Puckett. It really sucks finding out that he wasn't the greatest of guys after the fact, but that was my guy. And I remember because he was kind of built like a barrel, like he was just kind of squatty and bulky. And as he was sitting there, or he's standing up in the box and he's batting, and this couple's like, ooh, I think we're gonna he might hit one out here, and we were pretty far up, like 20 or 25 rows, I think, from the actual fence. And I remember the guy making a comment about how, well, if he gets a hold of one, it's really going to go far, because all they're doing is seeing how stocky he is and how bulky he is. And the whole time I'm like, he's not a power hitter. Like, he can hit a home run, but he's an average hitter. And I wanted to say something, but I was like 10. So I kept my mouth shut. But I really wanted to say something to them, just to be like, hey, get your shit right here, idiot. But anyway, so that was my first experience. I don't even remember who won the game. I think Randy Johnson was pitching that day, because I remember sitting in the stands and seeing just how gigantic that guy was. I mean, even when you're sitting back that far, you can tell there's a vast difference between that guy and everybody else when he's standing up on that mound. And especially with the mullet kind of flowing out the back of his hat there. And then there was a couple other times that really stick out to me when it comes to professional baseball games. We had another time that we went up, and it was for, I think, my high school graduation. My sister bought me some tickets, and she had asked me earlier, who would I rather go see, the Twins or the Baltimore Orioles? Because at this time, I'd become a huge Cal Ripken Jr. fan. That guy in my heart is kind of replaced Kirby Puckett, since Kirby Puckett turned out to be not the greatest of people, and Cal Ripken is he's the epitome of kind of work ethic and staying the course and always being there, and no sick days, no days off, and all that other stuff. And so at that time I was like, I absolutely want to go to an Orioles game. I would love to see the Orioles play. So we ended up going up there, and this was after they built Safeco Field, which is a great ballpark. They went from arguably one of the worst to one of the best. Safeco Field is great. And I remember going up to this game. We got to see Cal Ripken play. I believe it was the season he broke Joe DiMaggio's, Lou Gehrig's record for most consecutive games played. And I remember we're sitting third base side in foul territory. Pretty good spot for a foul ball. But we were pretty far up. Somebody would have had to have gotten a hold of it to get it up towards us. And all of a sudden, there's just this wretched smell around us. And we're looking around, and there's this family behind us who had brought in their own smelt, I think is what it was. It was some sort of like dried fish, and it was vacuum sealed. And they opened it up, and the second that thing got cracked, that whole section stunk. I mean, it absolutely reeked. Got to the point, we got up. My mom couldn't take it anymore. It was going to make her retch. She was so disgusted by the smell. It was just awful. So we actually got up and went and hung out inside. Because I think we had suite tickets for this game. So we went up and hung out for a little bit just to get the hell away from the smell. It was god awful. So yeah. So that was another experience. Another one that I had was when I was in 8th grade. And let me know in the chat here, is this something that they do down here in El Paso? Because it's something they did pretty big in Oregon. I think it was right after you graduated 8th grade, you take a trip to Washington, D.C., and you get to go check out all the monuments. You get to check out Virginia and all these other, like that whole area right there. And it was a super fun, super cool trip. And one of the nights we got to go to a Baltimore Orioles game. And this, again, we got to see Cal Ripken play, because this would have been in the middle of his streak. And I remember they had bought like a whole section of seats for all of the group of kids that were going. And here's the thing. There was maybe 8 boys that went on this trip and like 40 or 50 girls. Like the ratio was great for us. Because I remember we ended up, like, they split, into your rooms, and there was only like 2 rooms with that had the boys in them, because there really wasn't a lot of us. But they had gotten a whole section for all the students. And then I remember one of the teachers, who was one of my main teachers throughout middle school, she on the bus puts her hand up. She's got 2 tickets in her hand. She's like, we have 2 special seats here that are closer. They're right next to the bullpen, because at Camden Yards, the bullpens are out in the outfield, and so they have the bleachers in left field, and then you're lined up right there up against the you're right there up against the bullpen. And she's like, "Who wants them?" Everybody's raising their hands up, and all of a sudden I was like, might as well. So I popped my hand up, and she immediately says, "Brandon, they're your tickets." So I picked one of my buddies, and we got to go sit in these seats together. And she told me afterwards, we had these meetings that led up to us leaving for DC, where the parents had to meet, the students had to be there, because it was all about etiquette. They weren't going to take you to Washington, DC if you were going to be a jackass. If you got in trouble, you weren't allowed to go to on this DC trip. They were very strict about it. So you had to make sure you're on your best behavior all year. Your grades had to be, top notch and everything. Otherwise, you weren't going on this trip. And so one of those meetings, I showed up in my baseball uniform because we had a game that day, and we had to leave the game early to make it to this meeting. And that stuck out to this teacher's head. When she saw me show up in my baseball uniform, she immediately, they had these extra seats, and she kind of had them with my name picked on them already, which was kind of cool. And anyway, there's a couple more stories that I'm now blanking on, which is awesome, that I'm kind of trying to remember. There was another time I was in San Francisco, and I got to go to, I think it was still Candlestick Park at the time. It was before they had the new ballpark. The Colorado Rockies were in town. And there's a reason I remember the Colorado Rockies were in town, because my sister went to college down at Santa Clara. And Santa Clara is just outside San Francisco. You could take the train into town. And so I was visiting her. We took the train in, and we were going to go to a ball game that night. And I remember, wherever this train drops you off, you have to walk through the ghetto to get to this ballpark. And it's just me and her. I think I was a sophomore or a junior in high school. My sister was like a freshman or sophomore in college. And it was just, it was weird. Like, just two white kids strolling through this ghetto and making it to the ballpark. But the reason I remember it was the Colorado Rockies, because it was earlier that day, we were near where the trolley, where it ends, and they spin it around, and they send it back down in the other direction. And I remember, as we were standing there, Larry Walker was waiting for the trolley, and I geeked out to my sister. I'm like, "Oh my God, that's Larry Walker." She doesn't have a fucking clue who it is. She's like, "Who is this?" And I'm like, "It's Larry Walker." Like, at the time, one of the best hitters in the game. That's Larry fucking Walker. Before cell phones, before any of the cool stuff. No, it was, it was, one of those experiences that still stands out in my head. And Joe's asking, they gave free tickets for dressing up. No, they gave me free tickets because I had my uniform on. Everybody had free tickets, but they had these two special tickets that were in the outfield. I don't know how they got the tickets, but when they were deciding which student they were going to give them to, considering I showed up in my baseball uniform, they had kind of reserved those tickets for me. But yeah, and then I think that's really all the professional baseball stories I really have. I do have one that was kind of a freaky moment when I was playing baseball. Summer between my 7th and 8th grade year, we were playing this team. I think it was the county tournament, and there was one of those kids. He's hitting puberty before everybody else, and the kid's just throwing heat for how close they're pitching from. And I don't really remember what happened, but I leaned into a pitch and I took it right in the ear hole. And I guess it knocked me out when it hit me. And the way that I fell down, like the way that I landed, they thought I broke my neck. Because the way that I buckled, I landed on my head, and the way that it twisted, they all thought that I might have been paralyzed. So what I do remember is waking up, and I just looked up. Everything felt fine. Nothing hurt. Like, I felt great. And it's just my coach and my dad and our other coach standing there, and they're yelling at me, "Don't get up, don't move." And I'm like, "Well, why not?" Because nothing hurt. I felt perfectly fine. So, so then, they called an ambulance. An ambulance comes in, and they do the whole thing. It ended up, I just had I ended up with a severely sprained neck where it actually started to swell up, and then the pain started to kick in. But we ended up winning the game. I made it back before the game was over, and I think it was for third place in the county tournament. So we ended up making it back for that. Or my dad and I did, because it ran us to the hospital really quick. And and everything ended up being fine. But those are pretty much my baseball stories, which leads me into this. I'm 38 years old. I've been to many baseball games. When I was in Florida, I went to a ton of Marlins games. They kind of gave us a whole reserved third row section because nobody's going to those games down there. And this was before they moved into their new stadium. So there was really nobody there. It's hot as balls out there. And, as we're sitting, like I would, oh my God, Miguel Cabrera, I hated that guy. This is when he was playing for the Marlins. He's playing third base. And I remember a ground ball's coming to him. He doesn't even try for it. He just kind of goes like that, like just kind of reaches his arm over, and it just skirts right on by him. I believe a run scored on that play because it ended up going in the corner, and the guy from second was able to score. And we're close enough to him. I am just being fucking relentless on Miguel Cabrera because, dude, like you're being paid millions of dollars, and your ass can't bend over to pick up a ground ball, you lazy piece of shit. But yeah, so that was one of those. And there's one time we came close to getting a foul ball, and it was in that section where we're right there on third base side. A hotline drive's coming right at us, and a guy I worked with has his hat. He's holding it like this. Literally, he turns, the ball bounces into his hat, and then just shoots right back out and ends up like 3 rows in front of us, and somebody else gets the foul ball. And I was standing right next to him. I was like, fuck. So I'm 38 years old. I've been to more baseball games than I can possibly count in my head. I've never caught a foul ball. Never have. Last year, we went to one of the Chihuahuas games, and I got one of the players to throw one to me, and I gave it to my daughter. But I have personally never actually caught, balls up, catch the foul ball. And that's what I'm determined to do this summer, or at least in the time that I'm able to go to Chihuahuas games, which is why I'm going to head out to the one today, is that I want to catch a damn foul ball. So that's my goal or my mission here for this entire summer is to go to a Chihuahuas game and catch a foul ball. But there are some specific rules to it. I either have to catch it on the fly or a pretty solid bounce. It can't be like, oh, there it is, but it ends up over here, and then you run and pick it up. That doesn't count. You need to actually catch it on the fly, or maybe if it shoots up over the top of you, ricochets off the balcony and comes down, and you catch it off the ricochet, that's perfectly fine too. But anything that where you're picking it up off the ground, it doesn't count. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that you ended up with the ball. That doesn't count. And I'm noticing here that Dead Side is saying, I've never been to a pro baseball game. You should. Pro baseball games are awesome. They're relaxing. They're a ton of fun. And if you get bored, there's things that you can do to make the game more exciting, which leads me to the final thing for the AfterBuzz today, and that's mound ball. If you've never played mound ball, you're missing out big time. So mound ball, when an inning is over or a half inning is over and the defense is coming off the field, the other team is running out onto the field, the umpire will generally take the ball, whichever one they're going to be using for the beginning of the inning, and he tosses it out to the mound. Now, let's say there's 3 of us sitting here. We're playing mound ball. I'm in the middle. We all pitch in $1. You got a cup usually. Everybody pitches in $1. This person is holding the cup for the first half inning. Once the umpire tosses the ball rolls up the mound. If it comes off the mound and it's sitting in the grass, nobody wins. Everybody pitches in another $1. Now I'm holding the cup. Now there's $6 in the cup. Next half inning, umpire throws the ball out. It kind of goes up to the mound and rolls back down. Nobody wins. So everybody pitches in another $1. So now you got $9 in the cup. Now this guy's got it. Next half inning ends. Umpire tosses the ball out. It rolls up. Stays on the mound. It doesn't roll off. It's still on the dirt. Guess what? This dude just won $9. So that's mound ball, and it's actually pretty damn exciting. I've had a few questions here about if I've ever met anybody famous. And in regards to baseball, I'm not sure. There's a few that I would definitely geek out to if I were to ever meet them. Cal Ripken obviously being one of them. I think Ken Griffey Jr. would be another one that I would really, really love to meet. But I'm trying to think of any that I have actually I've not interacted with, but I remember last year, I think it was, Ivan Pudge Rodriguez. He was here in El Paso for the Sports Expo that we had going on down at the ballpark, and it was really cool seeing him. But in regards to meeting somebody or talking to somebody or anybody like that, I can't think of of really anyone. Although there's been a few that we would bring into the station when we were in Florida, but I can't remember any really big names coming through there. But I mean, you met the occasional ball player, but nobody big name and nobody I've geeked out to yet. But I guarantee you that there's a lot of baseball players out there that if I were to meet them, Ozzie Smith, holy crap, I would love to meet like Ozzie Smith. That guy would be fantastic to meet. And the list could go on and on and on here. But other than that, I got to get going to the ball game. If you guys are able to make it out there, come on by, stop on, say hi. I might have a Chihuahuas hat on. I might not. I haven't decided yet. I know it's going to be hot AF out there today. We're looking at 90-something degrees here in El Paso today. And coincidentally enough, if you're here in El Paso, it's going to be like in the 60s on Friday. So just be prepared for that cool down here. But I'm heading off. May or may not have it. Just look for this shirt, actually, if I'm at the ballpark. Or if you're at the ballpark. Come on, stop by and say hi. No MMA talk this week. We'll bring it back up when the next UFC fight is coming up and we get Randy and Isaac in here again. But I believe next Tuesday we will also be doing another D&D creation of a wizard this time, which will be our fourth and final character that we're creating until we start, going out on these quests. And it'll get to the point where, if we're at a military gamer supply or some other place here for these games, you guys will be able to come hang out, shout out, things to us, and hopefully get you guys some free stuff. And it'll be a ton of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. So on that note, I'll check you guys later. Have yourselves a glorious day. Go Chihuahuas.